All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I feel like I feel very special for getting to speak to you on the last day. I'm just going to assume that I'm the closer. I'm just a person who's brought in to shut it down and make sure that everybody learns. In case we've never met, my name is Adam Peck. I'm currently the interim vice president for University Affairs here at Stephen F. Austin, but I'm going to go back to the best job I ever had, Dean of Student Affairs, September 15th. It will be so refreshing to do a job I know how to do, so that's really wonderful. So I was invited to talk today about experiential learning, which is something that we often think about outside of the classroom, and the folks who work with me in the Division of University Affairs, or at least maybe some who used to, you probably have a good sense already of how we try to help students learn through their experiences. So I'm going to share some of the thoughts that I have about that. And I would not have the audacity to tell faculty how to teach in a classroom because that is not something I know how to do nearly as well as you do. But I'm going to try to show you some of the parallels, I think, and the ways that we approach learning through experience and hope that it resonates with you as well. We're also going to have some time for discussion, and in fact, that's how we're going to start off right now. So I'm going to treat this as sort of a pair share. Find somebody sitting near you and just begin to have this conversation. What to you was the most impactful learning experience you had in college? That's a big question, right? So sometimes some of you are already thinking like, I remember the moment, I've talked about this moment, but some of you may need to dig a little bit to get there. So you might ask yourself this question. What mentors helped you grow the most? And in what ways did they help you grow? So find the handle on either one of those questions and just begin to maybe have some conversations, maybe just a couple of minutes. Some of you are like, we're not playing your game. That's all right. You know, typically in an exercise like this, you can wait for people to slowly stop talking, but I could already tell that was not going to happen with this group. So who would be willing to do the share part of the pair share? What were some of your meaningful learning experiences in college? Is this an audience or an oil painting?
I'm afraid to share from my partner because she is from the Philippines. Yes, did not have wonderful teachers, but no. What are my
well, that might have been its own meaningful learning experience in and of itself, right?
They were teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't
So
they don't mentor.
So
we
maybe
learned-
be the teacher you needed. I saw that recently.
that's
yeah.
actually what we discussed.
Yeah.
That was actually we learned from negative experiences. So there you go.
That's great. Who else?
Well, I had, and mine was an adjunct. That was a HR director for ExxonMobil down in Beaumont, because I went to Lamar. And it was an HR class, and I just switched my major, so I was really excited about it. But we had this giant course project where we had to create a hypothetical company, and essentially, as we were learning the material, create an employee handbook. So we wrote job descriptions, wrote performance appraisal forms, and wrote policies and all of this stuff. And then at the end, we presented as a group. So I enjoyed that tremendously, probably more than any other student in the class.
Right. I was going to say, the thing you seem to learn about yourself is you're like, I'm this kind of nerd. This is exactly the kind that I am. So I say that with great love and affection and knowing Jamie. So who else?
One of my mentors in college, my bachelor's is in English, and she was not only one of my professors that I took for most everything, but she was also my advisor. So I spent a lot of time in her office and just having conversations about things that interested us and where we fit into those subjects and just more shooting the breeze at the time, but it developed into so much more, and that's become one of my specialties or interests for English. And then I'm now getting my master's in English as well, in addition to the other masters I already have. But yeah, so that was just part of it. Was she was just there to discuss those things with me, what interested me. Even outside of the classroom or in the classroom, so,
And it shaped the kind of educator you want to be?
yes.
Yeah. All right, maybe one more. Gina?
Yeah, right. Mine was not, back in the day, we didn't do learning by doing. I was an English major as well. We sat and read books and talked about them, so I had to learn to analyze them. But one thing, being a first-gen college student, was I had no idea how to navigate the system. None. I didn't know what a credit hour was. I didn't know how to know what my major was, where to find the information. I went to undecided student advising, Dean of Liberal Arts, and sat down with this nice little man, and I said, I don't understand, help me. And he picked up a bulletin, a hard copy, right? Yeah. Opened it and said, okay, this is where you know how to do stuff. He showed me how to navigate this unfamiliar system. It was like a light bulb came on to me. It was completely transformative. I went in there not knowing anything, and I came out with the tools and the knowledge of how to navigate myself this system that I was not familiar with.
And I know what you do for a living, but can you share it?
I'm an advisor.
so it all worked out.
Yes.
Story has a happy ending.
Because of the impact he made on my life, and I never forgot how that made me feel. That's what I do for a living now, and I do that for other people.
It's amazing. It's funny, when I think back about my own experiences, I went to one liberal arts college and then transferred to another, and probably for the first 15 years of my career, which overlaps some of my time here at SFA, I thought transformative education was what every college tried to do. And so I definitely didn't even realize how much I had been shaped by a number of different experiences, but mostly just having people tell me at the beginning that this was supposed to transform me. That in and of itself was sort of a transformative experience. As we think about that, how many of you participated in the reading of the undergraduate experience that we did a few years ago? A handful of you, and you might have observed this in that book. Peter Felton and Associates mentioned Richard Light's classic study of Harvard students, where he asked them about their most meaningful experiences in college and found that 4 out of the 5 that he learned about happened outside of a traditional classroom. I think it's even kind of interesting that Richard Light began by observing, I thought it would provide sort of a modest supplement to their learning in the classroom. But when we think back upon it, how many of you could really remember, and probably this group is going to be disproportionately represented in the yes category, but how many of you can remember specific lectures from college? I know that each year I remember less and less of those things. But it's very likely that those that we do remember, we remember because they included some sort of experiential or active learning, kind of like what Jamie was talking about there. So one of the things, if we want our students to be transformed, we do have to find ways for them to observe the change that they experience over college. How many of you have noticed the signs we have up all over campus that say your most important project in college is you? I've been thrilled to see how much people have embraced that, and you see them on faculty doors and in departments and offices. That's the thing our students need to understand. They come to college with such consumerist notions of what college is for. You give us money, we'll give you classes. You can trade those classes for credit hours. You can trade those credit hours for degrees. You can trade a degree for a job. And then a job equals a happy life. It's all very transactional, except we all know students for whom that didn't work at all. I have the privilege of sitting up on the platform at graduation, and so I see all the students go by, and I at least, and for those of you who come to commencement and take part in that, you probably have a few go, whoa, that one? Really? All right. All right. I guess that worked out. They must have gotten a lot smarter after my class, or a lot more dedicated. So we've got to help them think about where they want to be and then notice the changes that happen. We were talking about children earlier today and how life accelerates when you have children, right? And so every single day we see our children and we notice over time that they change, but you don't see that change day to day, do you? It's so subtle. I was looking at some pictures of my son. This is him when he was a little bitty baby. And then here's him a little bit older, and then here's him about a week and a half ago. And it all goes so slowly you just don't even notice, but we've got to remember to take those snapshots. How many of you had parents who put your school pictures in like one of those little school bus frames, right? How many of you still have, they're still up at your parents' houses, right? You're very fortunate in many different ways. Next time you're there, go take a look at it and just notice that change. There may even be 2 years in there where you're like, I don't look like I aged a second. But there are years where you take gigantic leaps in there, right? So one of my favorite books about student learning is called Learning is Not a Sprint, with Kathy Collins and Darby Roberts, who's at Texas A&M University. And in it, they observe something that's really important. Learning is not a sprint. It's a long, slow run. It's a jog. And so we often want to treat student learning as if we can make great leaps forward in short periods of time, right? This is actually particularly epidemic in the field of student affairs. We believe that we can teach you something very complex in a short period of time. We don't get a whole semester oftentimes. We may only have a single workshop or a conference that we put on for students. So one of the things we have to do is disavow ourselves of this notion, and I'm going to give you an illustration of that in just a moment. There was, in the opening of it, which was written by Stanley Carpenter, who's kind of a luminary in the field of student affairs, he said something that I found depressing but true, and I want to get your feedback on it. He wrote, "It's fashionable now for some to talk about the co-curriculum and its role in student learning. That is, it's fashionable for those of us in student affairs. For nearly all students, most faculty, and the vast majority of parents and politicians, this is nonsense. While they understand that students do change and grow emotionally and socially during college, they do not attribute that change to anything other than natural maturation and some vague notion about the college experience." Now for me, I think this was very true for a certain point in time, maybe up to 2012 when Dr. Carpenter wrote it. But how many of you still feel this might be true today, or that there's learning happening but there's no way to capture it? How do you respond to this? With stunned silence.
I still don't know if my students think that part of their college experience is an evolution of themselves. I mean, I've got business majors, so they're all very practical, go get the job for the most part. I tell them that that's part of why they're here and go do other things because it's more than what you learn, but they're just kind of looking at me like, no, I'm paying you to give me grades and I'll get degrees, and it's still that transaction.
What did you say? I didn't hear it.
Is this going to be on the exam?
Yeah, I always tell them life is an exam, and it's definitely on it. So,
I think for those of us who have student workers that work for us, we see them grow differently because we're not seeing them in the classrooms.
That's right. One of the advantages I think we have in student affairs sometimes is that we can teach in both success and failure. Failure in an academic sense is sometimes an end state, whereas it's really where we begin oftentimes. Sometimes we'll even notice students are about to fail and let them do it so that they have the experience of learning from that. I think that this speaks to the importance of helping our students, telling them in advance what they're going to learn from us, and that means we have to study it, we have to assess it, so that we can predict what kind of learning could take place. I remember earlier on in my career, it might take students 3 or 4 years to come back and tell you that you made a difference in their life because they didn't know they were supposed to be learning from us outside of the classroom. And so I have always said we need to find ways to shorten time to completion, and that is tell them what they're going to learn and then find ways to ensure that they're going to learn and then measure that learning and demonstrate it to other people like the stakeholders that they talk about. So this actually was the genesis of something we call Project CEO. So Project CEO stands for Co-Curricular Experience Outcomes. The learning that takes place outside of the classroom we refer to as co-curricular learning, in that it is intended to be parallel and complementary to the learning that takes place in the classroom, although there haven't been a lot of great models for how to do that. Today I'm going to share one, and what I really hope is that you leave going, that's workable. That's something we can really do. So I'll show you about that. So Project CEO actually became a national study that we actually host here at SFA, but which tens of thousands of college students have contributed to. It got the notice of NASPA, which is our largest professional association in student affairs, who helped me publish this book about it, which was actually a collaborative effort of 6 professional associations in higher education and student affairs. So it really began to sort of spread this work beyond our campus, and in fact, there are dozens of institutions around the country that give this survey every year to their students. The premise of it was that students can gain employment skills from participating in co-curricular experiences, and that we could measure those and that we could help them understand what they're learning. Now sometimes I'll have people say, well, doesn't that just reduce higher education to vocational training? And that is, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions about this work. In truth, it is the resurgence of the liberal arts idea. And if you look at the 60 by 30 Texas plan, when they say that students need to gain marketable skills, those business leaders who don't like the idea of a liberal arts education, they're like, just train them to do a job and let's get them out of here as quickly as we can, actually said they need these skills. Things like critical thinking and problem solving, global intercultural fluency, digital technology, teamwork and collaboration. That's a big one you can gain outside of the classroom. Leadership, professionalism and work ethic, career management, oral and written communication. How many of you have seen this list before or something like it? 21st century skills, right? So if you don't believe that these are as important as what they gain in the classroom, I give you Leonard and Sheldon. If you had a job open in the physics department here at SFA, which of these two would you hire? Would you hire Leonard or Sheldon? Now, Sheldon is probably smarter than Leonard. We don't actually know. We only really know that Sheldon thinks Sheldon is more intelligent than Leonard. But Sheldon's not a good team member, and he tends to really wear on the people around him, right? And you've got Leonard, who is arguably at least nearly as smart as Sheldon, but everyone likes working with him. He's got all of those other skills too. He can communicate, he can work as a member of a team. Who do you hire?
I kind of love Sheldon.
You kind of love Sheldon? You would have him around. He'd make an excellent theater professor, by the way. And his lighting designs would be spot on. I mean, they'd be fantastic. I think we'd probably all hire Leonard, right? So we've got to keep that in mind. These skills are as important as what they gain in the classroom. So this is some of the data from our most recent Project CEO. And this sort of teal bar that you see here is students' self-rated learning in those skills that we talked about. This giant bar here, without even telling you, we're looking at a variety of different experiences they have, and I want to see if you can guess what the big one is. Is it their classes? Is it internships or practical experiences? Is it co-curricular activities? Is it their job on campus? Is it their job off campus? What do you think they attribute the most learning in terms of those soft skills, those transferable skills? It's the classroom. That's the best place to learn those skills. You're like, I already knew that, but I'm glad you know it too. I do know that. But I think a lot of people are surprised and happy when they see, oh shoot, when they see how poorly I can work a clicker. What a nice addition co-curricular experiences can be in those areas, particularly in areas like influencing others, which is very hard to teach. You can see there's not much of a gap there between the classroom and co-curricular experiences, and areas like intercultural competency and leadership and teamwork, which is a very big one, verbal communication. So what this tells me is that two great sources of learning among those skills we talked about are the classroom and co-curricular experiences. And for years we have dreamed of finding ways to bring them together, and I think I have one to talk to you about. So Richard Keeling wrote a really influential book in student affairs. One was called Learning Reconsidered, and then the follow-up was called Learning Reconsidered 2. In it, he wrote something that I really use to center myself quite often, which is, he said, in our need to put things in categories, we've classified some parts of higher education as curricular and some as co-curricular, but students just call it college. So we have to remember that if they have to access an org chart to figure out how we work, we're off on a bad start already, right? And then he further wrote, it's realistic to consider the entire campus as a learning community. Mapping the learning environments for sites in which learning can occur provides one approach to supporting transformative learning that identifies strengths and collaboration, linking the best efforts of educators across the institution to support student learning. So I think that's a wonderful challenge. I will say that I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Keeling. He was a keynote speaker at a conference, and I went up and talked to him, and I said, hey, I use this quote all the time, and what did you mean? Like, what did it look like to you? And he literally said, I don't know. He said, I'll let other people figure that out. But I have a thought about that. So we've got to find a way to bring co-curricular and curricular learning together. We can't afford for them to be separate. And part of it is we have to find some shared goals, and I truly think we have some. So I want to share a couple more quotes. The first one here is from Dr. Gwen Dungy, who is the Executive Director Emeritus of NASPA, again, the largest professional association in student affairs. And she wrote an op-ed in Inside Higher Education as she was leaving her term with NASPA and becoming the Executive Director Emeritus. She said, for those in student affairs, it's time to stop saying that our programs complement the teaching and learning that occurs in the classroom, when at too many campuses, student affairs has no relationship with the faculty and no idea what the student's experience is in the classroom. I think this is true, but I also think it may miss an important point, which is, how could we do this? Is it possible for student affairs to teach skills that complement what people are learning in the classroom? Can I help a chemist become better at chemistry by participating in student government? If they're doing that, tell them to stop it. It sounds dangerous, right? I can't. I could maybe help an accountant be a treasurer in a student organization, but I actually don't know how to tell them to be a better accountant, so even that doesn't work. They'd just be learning through trial and error. I think that a better model is for us to ensure in student affairs that they're gaining gaining those transferable skills through their programs with us, knowing that the classroom is still a very rich way to develop those skills. And further, they're going to gain technical skills in their academic programs, and if we can actually center on those, we can really bring it together in an integrative way. What was really cool was this past January, I had the opportunity to co-author a piece with Dr. Dungy, and we revised her previous statement. And we were able to say the way that we really see it now, which is with the nearly infinite variety of possible technical skills, that makes it impossible to apply all of them in a co-curricular context, but focusing on transferable skills ensures that the skills students gain will complement their academic learning and their experiences inside of the classroom. Inside and outside of the classroom will connect like never before. So to put it very simply, we have a co-curriculum where they can learn. we have a curriculum where they learn, and the place where they overlap are transferable skills. So if you bring the hard skills and the soft skills, we'll bring the soft skills, and it really will integrate together. So you'll be glad to know that we track all of those skills in our student participants, and I'll share some of that data with you before we're done. Now we got to solve something I call the Pokemon problem. Anybody in here willing to admit they actually play Pokemon Go? In this group of austere people, we have one. All of these academic types, we have one person. That's great. I won't pick on you too much. But what do you got to do in Pokemon Go? You got to catch them all, right? So we treat skills like that. We're like, oh, teamwork? Yeah, I caught that one. All right, cultural competency? Boom, that one's in my gym. I don't really understand Pokemon Go. You can correct me later. You know, oh, leadership? Great. Problem solving, communication, influence? I caught them all. Except that's not the way learning works, right? You don't just take a bucket and fill it up with skills and then you're full and then we give you a diploma or give you an award at a student leadership awards banquet. Each one of those skills has their own level of skills, and we've got to figure out how to make sure that students can level up over time in each one of those skills. So we've been using this framework, which is that students should be able to gain higher order thinking skills and higher order skill development as they go in our programs. And so we're actually mapping that to make sure that it happens. We're not going to focus as much on this. Many of you recognize that as Bloom's revised taxonomy, although I'll show you some data later that relates to that. But it's these 5 A's of skill development that we really use to frame what we're doing with students. In order to accomplish developing a new skill, you have to first be aware of that skill and aware of your need for that skill and your level of that skill. Then you can begin the process of acquiring that skill. But unless you apply it, you won't truly have it, right? Does anybody in here want to get an injection from a nurse that's only put a syringe in an orange? Do you want to have a nurse put in an IV that learned exclusively online? You're like, I went to University of Phoenix and I've been wanting to try this procedure. You're like, you know what? I don't mean to pick on University of Phoenix. There you go. So then once we have the skill, we can begin to advance it. And then, and only then, can we begin to articulate it. I've noticed a lot of folks in student affairs that really want to focus on that articulation stage, but you can't articulate skills you don't have, right? So we're going to prove that in just a second too. So now, many of you have been eyeing these juggling balls up here and wondering, what is he going to do with that? I want to teach someone to juggle. Is there anybody in this room? And again, Keith is a ringer. I totally could have gone to him and said, hey Keith, later I'm going to teach you to juggle, and you just play along. But how many of you in here have ever thought, I'd kind of like to learn how to juggle, but you just never did? I'm going to need one guinea pig who's not afraid to look silly in front of a crowd of people. All right. Everyone, CC Con, come on, give it up. Perfect. You know,
not be able to teach me how to do this.
Here's the thing. I guarantee you that I will teach you to juggle. And I'm going to do it in 1 minute.
I will not be able to do
But I'm going to tell you when I'm starting the clock because we have a little bit of work to do first. Okay, Cece? I mean, you're not just going to come up here and juggle. I want to try a couple of things first. So first of all, I don't know if you're aware, or come on over here with me. We're actually videoing this, so I want to make sure that you're in the video. For a theater person, you have very little stage presence. Come right here. Everybody can see it. Okay. So can I teach you to juggle? Let's start off and let's build your knowledge of juggling, okay? So I don't know if you actually realize this, but some of the earliest recorded history of juggling is seen on cave painting walls in an Egyptian tomb. It actually belonged to Becket III, provincial governor, during the later years of the 11th dynasty of Egypt. And you can see that actually depicts some female dancers and acrobats, and clearly they're juggling, and one of them's even doing kind of a cool trick. I can't even imagine how you do that. I think your arms would have to be considerably longer than mine in order to do that. But this is kind of the history of juggling. So did you know any of that?
No.
Awesome. So juggle. I just taught you quite a bit about juggling, so let's see if you can juggle.
Nope.
Yes. I guess it didn't work. All right, so what is the fallacy I just illustrated here?
Learning is not giving.
Exactly. Knowledge and skill are not the same thing. We need both of them, and they're both important. But again, I'm going to call out my own people. How often do we do this? We go, hey, everybody, here's a quote from Ralph Nader. It says, the function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. Now go lead. That didn't do it either, did it? We need to actually try these things out in order for them to work. So let's go back to those 5 A's again, and let's teach CC to juggle through the lens of those 5 A's. And let's also remember that there is this thing I call the knowledge skill continuum, which is having knowledge about something is important and foundational in learning, but you actually have to do it in order for it to be successful. And even further, there's this sort of middle point, this tipping point, if you will, that is really important, where we cross over from knowledge into skills. So we're going to see if that can actually happen today. Now I'll tell you, CC, you will not be a professional juggler at the end of this, but you will at least have the knowledge that you need to build a foundation to do this over time, especially if you really want to. So those 5 A's kind of are spread out throughout that as well. In the knowledge section, we have awareness, acquisition, and application. That's where we're actually learning about the skill. And then by the time we get to advancement and articulation, we need to actually have skill. You can't teach something that you don't know how to do. So let's establish a baseline. So this is where my 1 minute period of time begins. For this, you'll only need 1 ball. And I'm going to have you stand right next to me because, again, I'm taping this. Can you juggle 1 ball?
I don't think that's juggling. No.
You know what? I was wrong. You are hopeless. Please have a seat right over here.
Okay.
1 ball juggling, everybody! You know what? I still have time left in my minute. Let's see. Could you juggle 2 balls?
Oh God. No. The answer is no.
I would call that bad juggling, but it's juggling. Let's give it a round of applause. Now, actually, here's what's amazing. I've done this all over the country, and I've never had anybody start juggling that way with 2 balls. What they actually normally do is this. How many of you would have approached it this way? Right? Could you do that?
I can't do it. I'm telling you, I can't do it. I can't.
You know, here's the good news about that. The
can't
first
do
thing you
it.
have to do is unlearn that. If you
Okay.
want to learn how to juggle,
Okay.
that is how 2-ball juggling can work. No, I don't want you to keep working on that skill because it's a
Okay.
bad skill.
It's a bad skill. Okay.
We would have to unlearn it.
See?
Doing this does not lead to 3-ball juggling because there are probably people who could do it that way, but I'm certainly not one of them. So we're going to break this skill down into some miniature skills. So the very first one is throwing the ball at a consistent height. Now I already noticed you've got a preference for not throwing it very high. This is actually much harder. It is much harder to juggle. Here, let me see your ball for just a second. You can actually throw it up if you want. All right, it is much harder to juggle like this than it is to juggle like this. You see how you've got so much more time to think about it? So see if you can throw that ball a consistent height. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to throw mine up too. See if you can match what I'm doing. She's pretty good, isn't she? Yeah. All right. So here comes the next skill.
It's not going to happen. Okay.
Can you catch the ball without looking? So when you throw it up, you watch it at its peak and you use that to determine where your hand should be. I couldn't even imagine catching a ball this way. It looks extremely awkward. By the way, juggling is excellent exercise, especially for the abs, because you got to bend over quite a bit to pick up balls. So,
Okay.
this is all right. So throw it up and see if you can catch it without looking specifically at your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe keeping it just this side of the ceiling. She's got it. How about that? Okay, so we're ready to level up. Can you juggle 2 balls with 2 hands? Now, this one's a little trickier.
Yeah.
So you're going to throw this up, catch.
Oh, okay.
Throw this up, catch. This one will take a minute.
Throw up, catch. Hold it. No, I don't.
Now I'm going to recommend, by the way, are you
Show me
right-handed or left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
Perfect. I'm going to recommend you throw with your left hand first. So you're going to go, what?
Right.
And I want you to think about it as if there is an X right here. And you're going to go, what?
Left, right.
All right.
Left, right. Left, right.
Just left, then right. And catch.
Left, right.
Okay, you did the throwing part excellently. The catching part needs a little bit of work.
Left, right.
Oh my gosh, again, the hardest part is actually seeing the pattern. So that's good, you're seeing the pattern. Now see if you can catch. All right, so that's not too bad. Everyone, I think we all agree,
Okay.
no one's leaving here until Cece can juggle. Am I correct about this? Okay, so actually we're
Not
gonna,
gonna happen.
that skill, if you don't like that skill, wait till you get to the next one.
I can't.
So that skill is foundational to the next skill of juggling,
I didn't get the
which is
foundation.
juggling 2 balls with 1 hand. This one will take the longest for you to develop, so it probably won't develop today. But here's what that looks like. You know what though?
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time. You don't ever need to do that exactly in order to juggle, but it does lead to this juggling trick, which is one of my favorites. All right. So in order for you to do it, throw one nice and high, throw the other one, catch, catch. If you can even do it 1 time, this crowd is going to erupt in applause.
Okay, all right. So did you have them both in your hand when you threw that one? Or?
You can do it. Yeah. Oh, put them both
Yeah,
in one hand. Throw one up. All right.
I threw it so you could catch it.
We're a great team. We're a great team. She did it! She threw it 1 time. So catching is an advanced skill. That's all right. And that leads to juggling 3 balls with 2 hands. Now later I'll teach you to juggle 3 balls with 3 hands. I can't do that. But it is simply the application.
Got the third hand to catch it. Wait,
Absolutely. We're going to take this comedy show on the road. It's too good to just waste it at the CTL conference room. All right. So remember this skill where we just kind of threw it like this? Remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember the skill where we did this? Juggling is simply catching that ball with the other hand. And when you see good juggling, which surprisingly you're kind of seeing today, I haven't dropped one yet, but that probably means I will. You forget.
your confidence, I'm sure.
It looks like 3 balls are in the air at the same time, right? But when you slow it down, you realize there's really only 1 ball that's going up and 1 ball that's going down. Do you want to try it? Let's.
Wait, I can't do 2 guys. There's no way I can 3.
This is the point at which I mentioned that I am not surprisingly was a theater major. So, all right, Cece, take 2
I
balls
don't
in 1 hand.
perform. Right?
Take 1 ball in the left hand and come right over here. All right, and what I want you to do is throw that one here, throw that one here, and then throw that one right before you catch that one there. If you can even do 1 rotation of this, you
Okay.
will, again,
I am
earn
a
the
resistant
entire...
learner. I refuse.
Give
I
it a try.
cannot. I would be so mad at my students if they said they can't do it.
Overcoming fear of looking silly is a big part of it, isn't it?
Up.
Oh my gosh! All right, let's give Cece a big round of applause. You can't hand the juggler a ball, you gotta throw it up in the air.
Oh, swear.
All right. What was the point of this exercise? The point of this exercise was I always wanted to be a performer and this was finally my chance. No, the point of this exercise is that where we got Cece was really to the point where Cece could probably explain to someone else how to juggle right now, even if she cannot do it. She could get this PowerPoint, she could walk someone through it, she could say, look, these are the steps in juggling. Even that isn't enough. We have to get our students beyond that threshold. Now I have to tell you, last night I took great joy in teaching my son how to juggle. And I have to tell you, I worked with him maybe for about an hour. I asked Cece if she'd be willing to stay here for an hour after class. She said no. But this is where he got in 1 hour. How about that, right? He will love your applause. I'll show him the video. So, he has now crossed over for that knowledge skill threshold. And if he continues to work on this skill, he could refine it. If Cece continued to think about what we talked about today and the breaking down of these skills, she will eventually learn it, even if she feels she's not coordinated or this isn't her gift. Anyone can learn to juggle. The hardest part is seeing the pattern. That X pattern, once you see that, it's just a matter of doing it until you learn it. So I would love it if somebody goes home and says, I learned how to juggle based on this. Please let me know. I don't think I've taught anyone to this point. So I want to talk a little bit about how this all fits in a framework of transformative learning experiences. This is something we've been promising to our students for about 5 years now, but have not found a way to operationalize or measure. So I have a very strong feeling about this. Is anyone familiar with the Stellar program at the University of Central Oklahoma? It's a program that's really about transformative learning. And I like the way that they conceptualized it, but I think we could even do it a little bit better. Transformative learning experiences have 2 parts, the experience and the transformation, right? So we can't simply measure what are they doing, what experiences are they having, but that's an important part of it. So take a look. Mentorship. So about 80% of SFA students say they have a faculty or staff person who is mentoring them. It's 90% if they participate in a student organization. And that makes sense, right? You've got faculty and staff who are advising student organizations. They get to work with them one-on-one, find ways outside of the classroom to talk to them about issues pertaining to the organization and things beyond that. And so I would love for that number to be 100%. And I don't think we need a structured mentorship program to do it. I think we just need the same ethos that caused us to get to 80% and for people to be really mindful of it. How many of you have ever participated in our Meal with a Mentor program? Watch your SFA email, watch SFA Today. There'll be a week in the fall and a week in the spring in which you can dine for free at any of our dining establishments, including our retail locations, so long as you bring a student with you. And we have a suggested list of conversations and topics, but you can talk about whatever you want. What we really just want is for a student to feel that sense of caring that is really a hallmark of what we do here at SFA. High impact active learning. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Again, how many of you participated in the faculty learning communities related to high impact practices? I see quite a few hands. We're going to talk about that. That is something that has a lot of potential for us. Scholarship and inquiry. How many of you do sponsored undergraduate research with students? How many students have participated in sponsored undergraduate research? I know some in this room. Engagement and leadership. These are some of those experiences that both we sort of curate in student affairs, but they're also related to academic disciplines. How many of you are an advisor of a student organization in some way, shape, or form? Lots of you. And then finally, we learn through our service to others. So one of the things, the ways that can transform you is in terms of your intellectual and skill growth. You can learn new things, you can learn to do new things. Your career readiness. We know that students who participate in these tend to develop the marketable skills that employers are looking for. Intercultural fluency. We learn about ourselves, we learn about others. Our self-image. We change the way we perceive ourselves. That's one of the most transformative things that can happen in college. Our personal well-being. Not just our physical wellness, but many different states of well-being. And then finally, in our ethics and values, we have people who teach us the right things to do and then give us the courage to do those things. So when we talk about high impact platforms in particular, now some of you just said, he just said platforms, he didn't say practices. We often refer to these as high impact practices, but in reality, they are just platforms. How many of you are engaging in one or more of these? So we've got first year seminars, common intellectual experiences, learning communities, writing intensive courses, collaborative assignments and projects, undergraduate research, diversity, global learning, service learning, capstone courses or projects, internships, or student employment. How many of you are doing one of those? Amazing, right? That is exactly what experiential learning is, right? But here's the problem. There is no magic in any of this. On campuses all over the country, there are people who are enthusiastically doing these things badly. These are the high impact experiences, not these, these. And that means that if you have these 6 conditions I'm going to share, anything you do could be high impact, even if it wasn't on that list. These are the active ingredient. So one is that they demand that students devote considerable effort and time to purposeful tasks, something that matters. They do something that matters. The nature of these high impact activities puts students in circumstances that essentially demand they interact with faculty and peers about substantive matters. Jamie, does that not describe the project you were talking about before? And then participating in one or more of these activities increases the likelihood that students will experience diversity through contact with people who are different from themselves. They didn't select which class they were going to be in based on how many people in that class were going to be like them. They got the shuffle of the decks, and they actually have to interact, and so they start to dispel myths they have about how different kinds of people are, and they also begin to replace those myths with a reality of diversity. This is the one that humbles me every time. Students get frequent feedback about their performance. In a co-curricular sense, I never give students a grade. I never return their paper or their assignment. I have to remember to sit and process it with them. I've got to help them learn from their success and their failure. Participating in these activities provides opportunities for students to see how what they're learning works in different settings, both on and off campus. And then finally, this is sort of a disclaimer of sorts, which is if you do these activities in the context of a coherent, academically challenging curriculum that appropriately infuses opportunities for active collaborative learning, it increases the odds that students will be prepared to make connections between those various things. So I think that's less of a challenge on the academic side, where there certainly is a coherent, well thought out curriculum. On our part, we've had to create that. So there's a basic theory of experiential learning as well, that if I had a room of student affairs people and I asked them, what does the theory of experiential learning say about experiential learning? And what they would probably say is, it says that students learn through experience. That seems reasonable, right? Except it's not true. What it says is, students learn from reflection on experience. You can have all sorts of experiences you never think about, and they'll make no meaningful impact on you whatsoever. So when we talk about reflection, reflection is more than just asking probing questions. What we tend to do is every kind of reflection we think about is actually this first one here, episodic reflection. A learning episode happens, we reflect upon it, and you learn. That does happen, and it can work in really good settings. If you do a service activity with students and afterwards you say, so tell me, what did you learn today? Let's say we go serve dinner at a homeless shelter, and you say, so what did you learn about homelessness today? The funny thing is, students may actually, at first glance, tell you something that is really a stereotype. They might not have had the chance to go a little bit farther. On an activity like that, we actually might use preflection. Hey, think about how is it that people become homeless? If you have an opportunity to sit and visit with people, take that opportunity. Ask them to tell you their story so that you can replace your expectation of what causes people to be homeless with the reality of this person's life. So that's really critical. Episodic reflection can be very good, and in the absence of other reflective activity, it's just fine. But there are some methods that can help you go a little bit farther. So periodic reflection, you could probably already guess what this means. Let's check in on a learning activity over time. So if we were doing, say, an alternative spring break program where we take students, and we do that program, we take students to different learning sites, they engage in service, they meet people, they have reflections every single night. What happened today? How did it challenge what you thought you knew yesterday? How is this group's needs different than the group that we served yesterday? Checking in across a short period of time. Or it could be periodic reflection. Let's check in at the end of each semester. Let's talk about how different things have come together for you. This is where it gets a little hinky. Epistemic reflection. How is what you're learning changing the way you thought things worked? How is it actually changing your cognition and the way that you think about things? And then finally, There's metacognitive, which is how is it changing the way that you think? How is it changing your reaction to the things that happen? So epistemic, what do you believe? Metacognitive, what do you think? So we could do an entire workshop just on this. If you're interested in reading something a little bit further about this, reach out to me and I'd be glad to share with you some information about these. But I think more than anything else, what I wanted you to understand is that reflection can be more than just questions after an event. It really can track how students change their beliefs and the way they think. So we actually have a couple of different reflective activities we do with students. I think Gina mentioned student workers. So we have a program, was it you or someone else? Oh, I'm sorry, it was Nancy. So we took this from the University of Iowa that does a program called Iowa Grow, where once a semester they sit down with their student workers and they just ask them these simple questions. How is this job fitting in with your academics? Are you learning anything here that's helped you in your classes? What are you learning in class that you could apply here at work? And then also, could you give me a couple of examples of things you've learned here that you think you could use in your profession? Those are really great questions, right? But of course, we're SFA, right? We got to go a step beyond that. So we created something we call Lumberjacks Grow. We have their permission. And what we did was overlap these questions about what you're learning from your job with those NACE skills that I showed you before. So we're asking them things like, does your job give you the opportunity to develop the skill of speaking and listening to others? And if so, what have you learned? And then here's what's great about it. If you're thinking, I'd really like to do this, we do it all online. So it actually works for our online students, it works for our on-campus students, and you don't even have to have the conversation. Students interact with these prompts and then they video themselves answering them. And so they can actually go back, watch the video. Students tell me all the time that they'll take one whack at it and then go, I was learning a lot as I was talking. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try it again. But oftentimes students tell us it prompts thoughts in them they would have never had otherwise. So if you want to sign up for that, just reach out to the Center for Career and Professional Development and they can help sign you up for that. I want to say one other thing real quick, and that is the data I showed you from Project CEO before, there was a finding in there that is really troubling to me, which is that students tend to ascribe more learning to their off-campus jobs than their on-campus jobs. I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I think it's because, as Vince Tinto has said, no one rises to low expectations. And oftentimes a good student work job is, oh, you can do your homework and nobody will bother you here. What if we made student employment a true high-impact experience? If we did that, we would not only be doing something significant in terms of learning, but the students we would be doing it for likely come from lower socioeconomic statuses than our students who work off campus. They are likely not participating in student organizations or other co-curricular experiences because they're working more hours. Oftentimes they're working here and off campus. So Denise, I saw a hand.
Yeah, I bet this Lumberjacks Grow is a really great program, and it costs a whole lot, I bet, to...
You know what, Denise? It's free.
No.
We're just giving it away. And I can say that as Denise and Residence Life is the greatest user of it. We've been doing this for our CAs. We also do it for students who work in campus recreation. So thank you for that prompt. It is free of charge. And this was a good commercial. I'm glad we rehearsed this. It came off real clean.
Maybe later.
We also have our Certified Student Leader program, where we've taken 6 of those NACE skills and we really focus on them with students. Students have to have held a formal leadership position in order to seek these certifications. The way they do them is they just submit a cover letter and a resume detailing their experiences outside of the classroom. What we're trying to do there is solve what we have called the 2-bucket problem, or the 3-bucket problem now, which is if they were sitting in their first job interview and somebody said, tell me about a time you had to make an important decision that impacted other people, they would first go to their work bucket. And they'd be like, well, I worked at Dairy Queen last summer. When did I make a big decision there that impacted people? Well, one time the ice cream machine got clogged. Well, that's probably not the example that an entry-level position's looking for. So they look in their second bucket, their classroom bucket. Well, did I ever make any important decisions or learn about important decisions in class? I really didn't. They forget to look in that third bucket, their co-curricular bucket. And so we are going to fill that bucket for them before they leave campus and make sure they gain that experience. So we've gone all in with this. If you actually go to the third floor of the Student Center, you'll see the icons for each of those painted on the pillars there. And when students earn their certifications, it's become kind of a tradition for them to go and snap their picture, put it on Instagram, and let people know that they earned that certification. We also want to help students we want to solve that Pokemon problem. How do we get them to level up? So what we have figured out is that the way that we are approaching students who are just kind of involved in experiences or engaged, which means that they're actually doing the work of the group, versus leaders, we're changing the way that we approach their development. And what we have found is that the more deeply engaged students are, the more likely they are to develop higher order thinking skills as they go. So this is actual data from last year. These are our student leaders. These are engaged students who are participating quite a bit. And these are involved students who are either new or just kind of participating at a surface level. We actually gave them a task. So we might say something along the lines of, could you communicate the purpose of your organization, which is at the lower end of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering and understanding. And then if they can do it, we count them in our data. So I'm not going to go through all of this data, but I just want you to kind of notice the relationship between these things. That what we're doing really seems to be paying off. All right, last thing. We're doing a program this year called Epic. The intention of it is to get students to go to things, get out of their room and get involved. Any event on campus is eligible for Epic. You just have to reach out to the Office of Student Engagement to be included. And what happens is they check in at the event using a link that we provide. You can put it on a QR code and just have them scan it on their way in. They give you some evaluation of that event, and then we use it to demonstrate that they were there. And here's what's cool. We're going to give away prizes all the time, but at the end of the year, we're going to select students who participated in the EPIC program, and based on their participation, give them entries in a drawing for a trip for two anywhere in the country, all expenses paid. Anywhere in the continental United States. If they want to cash it in for a scholarship, we'll do that too. So mom and dad may go, you are not going to Los Angeles by yourself. So that makes a really good incentive for students to get out there. So if you use this, you'll really help us make it useful to our students. So that's pretty much all I have time for today. I do want to encourage you to help us with our move-in program next Friday. If you're interested in coming out there sweating off some pounds, we got a free t-shirt for you. Just fill out the thing I sent to you in your email yesterday. So I didn't leave any time for discussion, but I'm going to be around, so come on up and talk to me. And I'm really honored to have been included in Camp CTL and to have the chance to talk to such a great group of people about my thoughts about teaching and learning. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you, Dr.